Chapter 1. The infinity altar hummed with cold, lethal energy. Valeth stood over her. His hand rested flat against the center of Xyrus's chest. The killing strike was ready. Again. This was the 1,000th time. "It ends here," Valeth said. His voice was empty. No anger. No pity. Just the crushing weight of an endless duty. Xyrus lay on the stone slab. She didn't struggle. She didn't beg. She looked up at him. Her breathing was shallow. In the past 999 loops, she had screamed. She had cursed him. She had cried for mercy. He knew every variation of her terror. He had memorized every sound she made before she died. Today, she just stared. "Why are you crying?" she whispered. Valeth stiffened. A single tear cut down his rigid jawline. He hadn't even realized it. He gritted his teeth, his expression hardening back into ice. "Close your eyes," he commanded. "It will be fast." "Who are you?" Xyrus asked. She didn't move away from his hand. "Why do I feel like I know you?" "You don't. You're lying." "Quiet," he snapped. His fingers glowed with the dark light of erasure. The magic pushed against her skin, ready to stop her heart, ready to reset the world. He just needed to push. 1 second, and it would be over. The timeline would restart. She didn't close her eyes. Instead, Cyrus lifted her trembling hand. She grabbed his wrist. Valeth froze. He could easily break her grip. He was the Chronos Lord. She was just a mortal in this loop. But he didn't move. She pulled his hand, the very hand carrying her death, closer to her face. She closed her eyes and pressed her lips to his knuckles. A soft, quiet kiss. "I don't know why," she breathed against his skin. "But I forgive you." The universe stopped. A sound like shattering glass tore through the silence. The mate bond, buried and suppressed by magic for 1,000 lifetimes, ignited. It didn't just spark. It exploded. A shockwave of pure, golden energy blasted out from where their skin touched. The force of it threw Valeth backward. He hit the stone floor. Gasping for air, the infinity altar cracked right down the middle. Above them, the massive hourglass of reality, the object holding the sky together, split open. Sand the color of starlight poured into the void. The killing magic vanished from Valeth's hand. "No," he choked out. The bond slammed into his chest, linking his soul directly to hers. He felt her fear. He felt her confusion. He felt a possessive, overwhelming instinct that screamed at him to protect what was his. It dropped him to his knees. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice shaking. Xyrus curled on her side, clutching her chest. "It hurts. Everything hurts." The scent of ozone and burning amber flooded the air. His scent mixed with hers. The sky above the altar turned violently red. The reset was failing. The system was breaking. "The cycle is broken." A booming, mechanical voice echoed from the falling sky. "Error. Target survives. Eradication protocol initiated." Black lightning struck the pillars around them. The ground shook violently. The universe was stepping in to finish the job he failed to do. Valeth looked at his hands. For 1,000 lifetimes, he had killed the woman he loved to save the world. He had played the dutiful executioner. He looked at Xyrus. She was looking at him, helpless, trusting a man who had just tried to end her existence. "Valeth," she whispered. She didn't know his name 5 minutes ago. The bond was feeding it to her. Something inside him snapped. 1,000 lives of obedience shattered in a single second. He made his choice. Valeth lunged forward. He scooped her into his arms, pulling her tight against his chest. His aura flared, a blinding white light that pushed the black lightning away. "Let them come," Valeth snarled. He channeled forbidden magic, the kind that ate at his own memories, at his own soul. He wrapped it around Xyrus, forming a shield. The altar crumbled. The void opened beneath them. a swirling storm of broken timelines. I refuse, Velith roared at the crumbling heavens. His eyes burned with golden fire. Let the world burn. He tightened his grip on his mate and threw them both into the tearing rift in space, leaving the dying universe behind. Chapter 2. They crashed onto the floor of the timeless sanctuary. The impact shattered the golden marble. The rift snapped shut behind them, cutting off the deafening roar of the dying universe. Silence crashed over them. Xyrus scrambled backward. Her hands slipped on the smooth stone until her back hit a massive pillar. She curled into herself, gasping for air. Velith didn't stand up. He stayed on his hands and knees. His golden aura wasn't a protective, divine glow anymore. It sparked violently, dying and igniting like a broken wire. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were completely wild, feral. He lunged. Before Xyrus could even scream, Velith pinned her against the pillar. His large, calloused hand shot out and wrapped directly around her throat. It wasn't a gentle, protective hold. It was a vice. He squeezed. Hard enough to cut off her air. Hard enough that absolute terror spiked in her chest. For a terrifying second, she thought he was going to snap her neck right here on the floor. "You're breathing," Velith whispered. His voice was a ragged, unhinged rasp. Xyrus tried to push him away, but her hands felt weak against his chest. Her lungs burned. She should have been fighting for her life, but as his thumb pressed brutally into her jumping pulse, a sickening heat flooded her veins. The mate bond flared, dark and intoxicating. It didn't scream at her to run. It screamed at her to submit. Instead of clawing at his face, Xyrus's breath hitched. For one horrible, involuntary second, she tilted her head back. She arched her neck into his grip. A twisted, dark thrill shot down her spine. She wanted him to press harder. "What is wrong with me?" The horrific realization snapped her out of it. She gasped, digging her nails into his wrist. "Let go." Velith loosened his grip instantly, but he didn't pull away. He leaned in closer, too close. He buried his face into the crook of her neck, inhaling deeply. He dragged his nose along her bruised skin, lingering far too long. "I don't care what it costs," he murmured against her collarbone, completely detached from reality. "You are mine now." Bravo! A stunning performance. The air dropped to freezing. Vespera stepped out of the shadows. The goddess of fate wore a gown of shifting silver threads. Her eyes were sharp, cold, and fixed entirely on Velith with absolute disgust. "Are you going to kill her with your sword this time, or are you going to smother her with your twisted love?" Vespera sneered. "Make a choice quickly, Velith. Both options are bleeding onto my carpets." Velith finally pulled back from Xyrus's neck, but he didn't step away. He shielded her completely with his massive frame. "Get out of my sanctuary, Vespera." "Your sanctuary?" Vespera scoffed. She pointed a slender finger toward the massive glass dome ceiling. "Look at what you've done, you fool." "Watch." Xyrus peeked out from behind Velith's back. She looked up at the cosmos. A distant, brilliant cluster of stars, an entire galaxy suddenly flickered. It didn't explode. It just died. Right in front of her eyes, millions of bright stars turned the color of dead ash and dissolved into the black void. Xyrus stopped breathing. "The rot has started," Vespera stated coldly. "Billions of lives just turned to dust. You broke the hourglass. Because of your little emotional outburst, the fabric of the multiverse is suffocating." "Because of me?" Xyrus whispered. Her stomach dropped. "They don't matter," Velith snapped. He didn't even look at the dying sky. He only looked at Vespera. Vespera stared at him, genuine shock breaking her icy facade. "You are condemning an entire multiverse for one mortal. I would condemn 1,000 multiverses." Velith took a step forward, his shadow towering over the goddess. "Let it rot. Let it all burn." Vespera slowly shook her head. "You aren't a savior anymore, Velith. You're a monster." She turned her back on him, stepping into a portal of silver light. "Enjoy your 3 days. When the universe collapses on top of you, I won't be here to dig you out." The portal vanished. Zyrus pushed past Valeth. She pointed a trembling finger at the sky. "Another one is fading. You have to fix this. Put me back on that altar." Valeth turned to face her. His expression was dead calm. It was terrifying. "No." He raised his hand. Heavy, golden chains made of pure light slammed over the massive oak doors of the sanctuary. Ancient runes flared across the walls. The room locked down like a vault. He walked back to her. He didn't stop until his chest brushed against hers, forcing her back against the pillar. "If you try to leave," Valeth whispered softly, his eyes tracing the red marks his fingers had just left on her throat. "I won't stop the wards from hurting you. I will break your legs before I let you walk out that door." He stepped back, leaving her trembling, and walked into the shadows to secure the perimeter. Zyrus sank to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees. Her throat throbbed. Her heart hammered with a sickening mix of terror and desire. "He's much more fun when he's broken." Zyrus's head snapped up. Zeke sat on the edge of the marble fountain in the center of the room. The spirit of the void swung his legs casually. His skin was the color of bruised twilight, and his black eyes swirled with malicious joy. "Who are you?" she demanded. Zeke's hopped off the fountain. He glided toward her, leaving trails of black smoke. "Just a fan of a good tragedy." "He acts like your great protector now, doesn't he?" "Get away from me." Zeke's reached into his tattered coat. He pulled out a jagged shard of black glass. It pulsed with a cold, sickening light. "You know," you screamed louder in the 237th loop. Zix whispered, his voice dripping with venomous pleasure. "You begged him. You promised you'd be good. It was pathetic." Xeris froze. "What?" Zix tossed the shard. It slid across the marble floor, stopping exactly at her feet. The black glass rippled like dark water. "Want to see how much he really loves you?" Zix coaxed, his grin widening. "Touch it. Watch him kill you." Chapter 3. "Go ahead," Zix whispered. His voice was a cold razor against her ear. "Touch it." Zyrus couldn't breathe. The black shard of glass on the marble floor pulsed. She reached out. Her fingertips brushed the cold edge. The world inverted. She didn't just see the vision. She felt it. A blinding flash of golden light. A heavy, armored hand closing around her throat. The sickening sensation of falling into nothingness. She saw Valeth's face above her. Not the frantic, obsessive man from 10 minutes ago. This Valeth was a statue. Cold, empty. He didn't hesitate. He just watched her heartbeat stop. The vision shifted. Another timeline. Another death. "You screamed louder in the 412th loop." Zix's voice echoed inside her head. He was laughing, a low, wet sound of pure enjoyment. "You begged him to spare you. You promised you'd be good. It was pathetic." A third vision flashed, a blade of pure energy piercing her chest. "But the 800th? Zix sighed happily. "That was art. He didn't even blink when you choked on your own tears. He just reset the clock and walked away." "Stop!" Zyrus shrieked. She snatched the black shard and hurled it at the marble floor. It shattered into 1,000 useless pieces. She collapsed, gasping for air. Her chest heaved. The phantom pain of 1,000 executions burned in her veins. He had killed her. Over and over and over. The heavy oak doors of the sanctuary exploded inward. The wards shattered with a deafening crack. Valeth stood in the doorway. He was breathing heavily. His golden aura wasn't a protective glow anymore. It was violently glitching, sparking and dying like a broken live wire. He didn't look like a god. He looked like a beast that had just torn its way out of a cage. Zix melted into the shadows, a wicked smile lingering in the dark before he vanished completely. Valeth crossed the massive hall in a fraction of a second. He dropped to his knees right in front of her. Zyrus flinched, throwing her hands up. "Don't!" He didn't attack. He grabbed her hands. His grip was entirely too tight. Desperate. Trembling. "Who was here?" Velith demanded. His golden eyes darted around the empty room, wild and unfocused. "Whose scent is that? Let go of me!" She struggled, but his fingers were like steel cages around her wrists. "You're bleeding." His voice dropped to a dead, terrifying whisper. Zyrus looked down. A tiny, insignificant cut on her index finger from the broken glass. A single drop of blood welled up. Velith didn't just wipe it away. He brought her trembling hand to his mouth. He pressed his lips over the tiny wound, his tongue sliding over her skin to catch the drop. Xeris froze. It was too intimate. Too long. It wasn't a gesture of healing. It was an act of possession. He closed his eyes, exhaling a shaky breath against her knuckles. It was as if the taste of her grounded his fracturing mind. "I won't let anything touch you," Velith murmured against her skin. "I will chain you to my own ribs before I let the outside world have you." He was losing his mind. She could see it. The cold Lord of Time was breaking apart. She should have kicked him. She should have run, but as his lips pressed against her hand, a terrifying heat bloomed in her chest. The mate bond flared. And it wasn't just the bond. Something darker inside her, something ancient and dormant, woke up. She didn't want to pull away. Her fingers twitched. She had a sudden, sick urge to tangle her hand in his silver hair, to pull him closer, to own the monster that had killed her 1,000 times. "What is wrong with me?" She ripped her hand away, scrambling backward. "You're a murderer!" she screamed, pointing at the shattered glass. "I saw it. I saw what you did to me." Velith froze. The unnatural, frantic energy drained from him, leaving a horrifying stillness. "You killed me!" Zyrus sobbed, pointing to the bruised sky above the glass dome. "And now you're killing everything else." Velith stared at her. His golden eyes were wide, but they were hollow. He slowly brought his hands up and gripped his own hair. His breathing grew shallow, ragged. Velith started. His voice trembled. The great Kronos Lord sounded like a lost, terrified child. "I had to." "Why did you have to kill me?" Zyrus demanded, crawling toward him, fueled by a sudden reckless rage. "Tell me." Velith looked at her. A single tear cut through the dirt and blood on his face. "I don't know." The words dropped between them like lead. Zyrus stopped breathing. "What?" "I don't know." Velith's voice cracked. He collapsed forward, his forehead hitting the marble floor right at her feet. His broad shoulders shook violently. "I don't remember." He reached out blindly, his large hands gripping the hem of her dress as if it were the only solid thing left in the universe. "The abyss," he choked out, his voice a pathetic, broken rasp. "I gave the abyss my memories of the past loops. It was the only way to break the timeline. To keep you alive today." He lifted his head. His face was a mask of pure agony. "I remember that I love you," Velith whispered, tears freely falling from his golden eyes. "I remember that I would burn creation for you. But Zyrus, I don't remember why. I don't remember your smile. I don't remember the first time we met. I traded our entire history just so you could take another breath." He buried his face into her knees, his massive frame trembling uncontrollably. "Don't ask me about the past," the broken god begged the mortal girl. "Please, I am forgetting your name." Zyrus sat paralyzed. Outside the glass dome, another galaxy turned to ash, but inside the sanctuary, the silence was deafening. She looked down at the man sobbing at her feet. The terrifying executioner was gone. The dangerous Alpha was gone. What was left was a god with absolute power, driven entirely by a blind, memoryless obsession for her. And heaven help her. She raised her hand and slowly stroked his hair. Chapter 4. Her fingers brushed through his silver hair. For a single, fragile second, the crushing weight of the dying universe faded. Velith leaned into her touch. He closed his eyes, his breathing finally slowing down. Then, The sky tore open. It wasn't a crack. It was a violent, deafening rip that tore through the fabric of reality. The massive glass dome of the sanctuary didn't shatter, it simply ceased to exist, swallowed by a blinding, unnatural white light. The sheer pressure of the light slammed into the marble floor. Velith moved on pure, lethal instinct. His breakdown vanished. He shoved Xyrus behind him, his golden aura flaring up into a massive shield. He planted his feet, taking the full brunt of the crushing gravity. "You broke the machine, little clockmaker." The voice didn't just echo in the room. It vibrated inside their bones. It was impossibly loud, devoid of any gender or emotion. A figure descended from the burning white sky. It had no face. It was a towering, shifting silhouette of pure cosmic energy, wrapped in cloaks of dark matter. The architect, the supreme creator of the multiverse. Xyrus gripped the back of Velith's tunic. Her lungs burned. Just looking at the entity made her vision blur. "You dare show yourself?" Velith snarled. His golden eyes burned with absolute hatred. "You built a flawed system. The rot is eating your worlds, and you want me to keep resetting the clock to hide your failure." The architect laughed. The sound was like grinding tectonic plates. "My failure." The massive entity floated down, stopping just outside Velith's shield. "Oh, Velith, you poor, loyal, arrogant dog. You really thought you were the savior of all creation." "I did what you commanded," Velith roared. "I executed the anomaly. I sacrificed my soul, my memories, and her life 999 times to save your universe." "Yes, you did." The architect tilted its featureless head. "And it was delicious." Velith froze. The golden fire around him flickered. Xyrus peeked out from behind him. "What does that mean?" "The resets," the architect said slowly, mocking them. "Did you never wonder where all that explosive temporal energy went every time you stopped her heart? Every time you hit the reset button?" Silence stretched across the sanctuary. A horrifying realization dawned on Velith's face. He lowered his hands slightly. "You consumed it. I am a hungry god," the architect stated flatly. "A universe is just a battery. But a dying universe, violently snapped back to its beginning, that generates enough energy to feed me for eons. You were running a farm for me, Velith, a slaughterhouse." "No." Velith took a step back, hitting Xyrus. He didn't even notice. He was shaking. "The anomaly. She brings the apocalypse. The prophecies. I wrote the prophecies." The architect's voice boomed, shattering the remaining pillars in the hall. "She isn't an anomaly, you blind fool. She is an antibody." Xyrus stopped breathing. "An antibody." The architect pointed a long, shifting finger at Xyrus. "The multiverse recognized me for what I am, a parasite, a disease. So, it evolved. It created her. A mortal girl with the latent power to completely eradicate me." The entity laughed again, a cruel, echoing sound. "But I found you first, Lord of Time. I told you she was the poison. And like a good soldier, you took the sword. For 1,000 lifetimes, the universe tried to cure itself. And for 1,000 lifetimes, you killed the cure for me." The words hit Velith like physical blows. He stumbled. His golden shield shattered into a million useless sparks. The weight of it crushed him completely. He hadn't been saving anyone. The 999 times he watched the light leave Xyrus's eyes, the 999 times he tore out his own heart and fed his memories to the abyss just to endure the pain. It was all a lie. He was the villain's favorite weapon. He had been slaughtering his own mate to feed a parasite. Velith choked. Blood dripped from his nose. His mind couldn't process the sheer scale of the betrayal. He turned slowly to look at Xyrus. His eyes were wide, filled with an agony so profound it made Xyrus want to scream. "I killed you," Velith whispered, his voice completely broken. "I killed you for them." Xyrus stared at him. She didn't see a monster anymore. She saw a god who had been tortured and manipulated into destroying his only reason to exist. She grabbed his arm. Velith. Touching reunion, the architect interrupted coldly. But playtime is over. You broke the loop, Velith. You stopped generating my food. That makes you obsolete. The entity raised a hand. A spear of pure, void-black energy shot forward. It didn't aim for Xyrus. It aimed straight for Velith's chest. It struck him dead center. Velith didn't scream. His body arched violently. The black energy didn't pierce his flesh. It pierced his soul. Xyrus watched in absolute horror as the radiant, golden aura of the Chronos Lord was violently ripped out of his body. The divine light screamed as it was torn away, sucked into the architect's shifting form. "No!" Xyrus screamed, reaching for him. Velith collapsed. He hit the marble floor hard. The gold in his eyes faded, leaving behind a dull, human silver. He gasped for air, clutching his chest. Crimson blood mortal. Fragile blood spilled from his lips, staining the pristine white stone. He had been stripped of his divinity. He was nothing but a mortal man. And now, for the cure, the architect hissed. The shadows beneath the entity surged forward. Massive, dark tentacles made of dead space whipped across the room, rushing straight toward Xyrus to consume her completely. Xyrus froze. She had no magic. She had no weapon, but as the shadows lunged, a large, bloodied hand grabbed her waist. Velith threw himself over her, stripped of his magic, stripped of his godhood. Bleeding from his mouth, he still used his own fragile, mortal body as a physical shield to take the hit. "You will not touch her!" Velith roared, his mortal voice tearing his throat. The shadows slammed into his back. Chapter 5. The shadows slammed into Velith's back. The sound of his bones cracking echoed through the ruined sanctuary. He didn't scream. He just gritted his teeth, his massive frame shuddering as he absorbed a blow meant for a god. Blood dripped from his chin onto Xyrus's dress. "Velith!" she shrieked, struggling beneath him. He didn't let go. His mortal arms were shaking, but his grip around her was absolute. How pathetic. The architect's voice boomed. Another wave of black energy whipped forward. It tore through Velith's shoulder. He gasped, dropping to one knee. He raised his head, his silver eyes completely devoid of magic, but burning with wild, feral defiance. "Don't look." Velith choked out, pressing her face to his chest. He was dying. For her. Again, something inside Xyrus snapped. It wasn't a slow realization. It was a violent, catastrophic break. The heat in her chest exploded. She didn't just feel angry. She felt a cold, absolute imperative. Eradicate the infection. "Get away from him!" Xyrus screamed. She threw her hands forward. A beam of blinding, pure white energy erupted from her palms. Raw, concentrated erasure. The light struck the architect dead center. The supreme entity let out a deafening screech as its shifting mass burned away. But the light didn't stop there. It pierced the architect and shot straight up into the exposed cosmos. It struck a distant galaxy. The light didn't burn them. It didn't explode. It simply erased them. 1 second, 1 billion stars burned brightly. The next, they were gone. A massive chunk of the night sky was wiped clean into absolute nothingness. Xyrus dropped her hands. The light vanished. Silence crashed over the sanctuary. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. She heard the echo in her mind, the synchronized silence of billions of beating hearts stopping at the exact same moment. She stared at her trembling hands. She should be vomiting. She should be screaming in horror. But for one terrifying, silent second in the back of her mind, it felt clean. It felt right. The parasite was gone from that sector. "Did you think the cure would be gentle?" The architect laughed. The entity was torn, but still reforming. "To kill a parasite, you must kill the host. You have to sterilize the entire multiverse." Xyrus fell to her knees. The horrifying thrill vanished, replaced by a crushing weight. I killed them, she whispered. Tears spilled over her cheeks. Billions of them. Velith dragged himself across the floor, leaving a trail of blood. He reached her, his shaking, mortal hands grabbing her arms. I'm a monster, she sobbed, looking at him. Let him kill me. Please, Velith. Let it end. Velith didn't comfort her. He didn't tell her it wasn't her fault. He slowly looked up at the massive black void where 1 billion stars used to be. His face was painted in his own blood. His eyes were entirely empty of pity. Good, Velith rasped. Cirrus froze. Let it all burn, the fallen god whispered, his grip tightening violently on her arms. Let every star turn to ash. As long as you are breathing. He had completely lost his mind. There was no hero left, just a rabid animal protecting its mate. Touching, the architect interrupted. The giant entity suddenly melted. It didn't attack. It sank into the shadows. The pillars. The marble floor. It stretched across the ruined sky. You missed your chance. The architect's voice echoed from everywhere at once. I am the cage now. I am the very core of this reality. The remaining stars turned black. The air dropped to freezing. Zyrus stared at the black walls closing in. Her instincts as the antibody screamed the answer. She couldn't shoot a beam of light to stop it now. She had to detonate her own soul. A cosmic bomb. It would wipe out the architect. It would wipe out the multiverse. And it would wipe out Velith. She looked down at the man bleeding on the floor. He was dying because of her. He had sacrificed his divinity, his memories, and his morality just to keep her safe. If she told him what she had to do, he would stop her. He would force them both to live in this rotting cage just to keep her. So, she made a choice. She lied. Velith, Zyrus whispered. She reached out, her hands gently framing his bloodied face. He leaned into her touch immediately, his eyes closing in desperate relief. He thought he had won. He thought she was staying. I won't leave you, she lied softly. Her thumb brushing over his cheek, she pulled him close, burying her face in his neck to hide her glowing, terrifying white eyes. She used his remaining strength, his warmth, as an anchor. While deep inside her chest, she began to ignite the spark that would destroy them all. Chapter 6. The white light in her chest pulsed. It wasn't magic. It was a countdown. A cosmic bomb waiting to tear reality apart. Velith felt the blinding heat. He looked up from the floor, his silver eyes widened. The madness in them fractured, immediately replaced by sheer, primal panic. He didn't have his godhood. He didn't have his memories, but the mate bond screamed a terrifying warning in his blood. She is leaving. No, Velith gasped. He scrambled up, his hands slipping on his own blood. He lunged forward and grabbed her shoulders. Stop it, he commanded. I have to, Zyrus whispered. Tears streamed down her face, glowing under the terrifying white light spilling from her chest. It's the only way to kill him. It's the only way to fix what I broke. I don't care, Velith roared. He shook her hard. I didn't give up my soul for you to die. You gave it up for nothing, she screamed back, pushing against his chest. We were tricked, Velith. We are killing everyone. If I don't do this, the entire multiverse will rot. The architect's voice hissed from the dark, shifting walls around them. Listen to the little anomaly, Velith. She finally understands her purpose. Let her burn the garden. Watch her burn with it. Velith ignored the voice. He didn't look at the dying sky. He only looked at her. He tried to push his hands over her chest, trying to physically smother the blinding light with his own flesh. His mortal skin blistered and burned upon contact with the pure erasure energy. He didn't pull away. He just pressed harder. Stop, Zyrus cried, grabbing his wrists. You're burning. Let it burn, he snarled, his teeth bared in absolute desperation. I am not letting you go. But he was weak. Stripped of his magic, his mortal body was failing. His knees buckled. The great Lord of Time, the cold, untouchable God who had executed her 1,000 times without shedding a single tear. He crashed to the marble floor. His bleeding forehead hit the stone right at her feet. His large hands clamped around her ankles. He was shaking violently, his broad shoulders heaving with every ragged breath. Please, Velith begged. The word tore out of his throat. It was raw. Pathetic. Completely shattered. Xyrus looked down. She stopped breathing. I don't know who I am. Velith sobbed. His voice was a broken, horrific rasp. I don't remember my past. I don't remember my own power. I traded it all to the abyss. He slowly looked up at her. His face was smeared with dirt, sweat, and crimson blood. He wasn't a god anymore. He was a terrified, hollow shell of a man, desperately clinging to the only thing that made his heart beat. If you leave me... Velith choked on his words, his silver eyes drowning in tears. There is nothing left. There is only the dark. I won't survive it. Please. The power shift was absolute. Xyrus stared at the man begging at her feet. For 999 lifetimes, he had held the sword. He had held all the power. He had decided when she lived and when she died for the sake of the greater good. Now, she held the leash. She held the fate of every living thing in her glowing hands. She could save the multiverse. She could eradicate the architect right now. She looked up at the black void above the ruined sanctuary. Billions of dead stars. Billions of lives she had already erased. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing her spine, screaming at her to do the right thing, to be the savior, to be the cure. You are the antibody, her instincts whispered. Cleanse the host. She looked back down at Velith. He pressed his face against her knees, trembling like a frightened child. He had slaughtered her over and over. He was a monster, but he was her monster. And he had broken himself into 1,000,000 pieces just to give her one more day to live. Xyrus closed her eyes. The blinding white light in her chest flickered. Coward! The architect mocked from the shadows. The entire room vibrated with the entity's twisted amusement. You don't have the stomach for it. Xyrus opened her eyes. The light died completely. The sanctuary plunged into cold, suffocating darkness. The cosmic bomb was diffused. The universe would not be saved today. Xyrus dropped to her knees. Velith flinched, but she reached out and grabbed his bloodied face. She pulled him up until they were eye to eye. His breath hitched, his silver eyes frantically searching hers. Xyrus, he whispered, staring at her empty, glowing, free chest. She didn't cry anymore. The tears stopped. A cold, heavy numbness settled over her heart. She wiped a streak of blood from his cheek with her thumb. Okay, Xyrus whispered into the silence of the dying universe. She leaned in and pressed her forehead against his. The mate bond purred, dark and satisfied, wrapping around their shattered souls. Let the stars rot, she said. Her voice was dead, stripped of all its previous warmth and humanity. She stared straight into his desperate eyes. I will be a monster for you. Velith let out a ragged, broken sound. It wasn't a word. It was pure, unadulterated relief. He dragged her against his chest, burying his face in her neck. He held her so tight it bruised her ribs, breathing in her scent as if it were oxygen. He didn't care that the world was ending around them. He didn't care that they were trapped in the belly of a cosmic parasite. He had his mate, but as Xyrus stared over his shoulder into the creeping black shadows of the architect, she felt a terrifying burning sensation deep in her veins. Stopping the detonation didn't stop her power. The antibody energy had to go somewhere. Since it couldn't explode outward to destroy the architect, it was turning inward. It was starting to eat her alive. She gasped, her fingers digging painfully into Velith's back. Velith, she choked out, her vision blurring as a sickening heat tore through her organs. Something's wrong. Chapter 7. The heat inside Xyrus was unbearable. It wasn't a fire. It was a white-hot pressure, expanding rapidly beneath her ribs. The antibody energy had nowhere to go. It was starting to eat its host. She screamed, collapsing onto the marble floor. Zyrus! Valeth caught her, before her head hit the stone. Her skin was boiling. Pure, blinding light cracked through the veins in her arms and neck, glowing through her flesh. She convulsed in his arms, her fingers digging desperately into his chest. It's tearing me apart, she gasped. He gripped her face. His mortal hands blistered where they touched her glowing skin, but he didn't pull away. His silver eyes darted frantically, analyzing the deadly light. He knew exactly what was happening. The power needs a conduit, Valeth said, his voice entirely breathless. It needs a way out. There is no way out. The architect's voice laughed from the shadows surrounding them. The entity was slowly creeping closer, a wave of suffocating dark matter. She stopped the detonation. Now she chokes on her own medicine. Watch her die, mortal. Valeth ignored the god of the multiverse. He looked down at Zyrus. I am your conduit, he stated firmly. Zyrus shook her head violently. No, you don't have your magic. You're human now. It will incinerate you. I don't need magic. He leaned over her, his broad shoulders shielding her from the creeping darkness. I am your mate. The bond is already there. We just have to open it completely. Zyrus stopped breathing. She knew what he meant. The final stage of the mate bond. The claiming. The complete merging of souls and bodies. If we do this... Zyrus choked out, tears of pure light spilling from her eyes. The energy will flow into you. It will kill you in seconds. Then we won't keep it, Valeth snarled. He looked up at the dying cosmos above the sanctuary. The sky was a bruised, rotting purple. The bond demands balance, Valeth told her, his voice dropping into a dark, feral growl. If it takes energy from you, it will demand life force to sustain me. We will drain this rotting universe dry. Let it pay the price for our survival. It was a terrifying, abhorrent logic. He was proposing they feed on the dying stars to fuel their own existence. Do it, she whispered, her back arching, as another wave of agonizing heat hit her heart. Valeth, please. He didn't hesitate. He crashed his lips onto hers. It wasn't a kiss born of soft romance. It was a brutal, desperate collision. Valeth tasted like blood and ash. He kissed her like a dying man stealing his last breath. The mate bond roared to life. It tore through the cold, dead air of the sanctuary. Zyrus grabbed his hair, pulling him closer as he dragged her up against his chest. His hands were everywhere, gripping her waist, pulling her flush against his bruised, mortal body. He tore the fabric of her ruined dress from her shoulder. Mine? Valeth growled against her skin. He buried his teeth into the juncture of her neck and shoulder. He bit down hard, breaking the skin. Zyrus screamed his name. The moment his teeth marked her, the floodgates opened. The crushing, white-hot pressure inside her chest surged upward. It rushed through the physical and spiritual connection, slamming directly into Valeth. Valeth threw his head back, letting out a deafening, agonizing roar. The pure erasure energy flooded his mortal veins. His silver eyes glowed with a terrifying, violent light. It was tearing him apart from the inside out. He was burning alive, but the bond reacted just as he predicted. To keep the Alpha alive, the bond became a black hole. Above them, the sky shuddered. A cluster of 100 stars outside the dome suddenly flared blindingly bright, and then went completely dark. Their cosmic life force was violently ripped from the void and sucked straight down into Valeth's back. He gasped, his grip on Zyrus tightening to the point of pain. The stolen life force healed his burning tissue just fast enough for the white light to burn it again. More, Valeth demanded, his voice a distorted echo. He kissed her again. Deeper, more frantic. They moved together on the ruined marble floor, in a horrific, beautiful ritual of survival. Every touch, every gasp, forced more of the deadly antibody energy out of Xyrus and into him, and with every ragged breath they took, the universe paid the price. Flicker, die. A dozen planets turned to dust. Flicker, die. An entire galaxy went dark. The architect's dark shadows recoiled. The supreme entity screamed as the raw, unfiltered suction of the mate bond began to tear at the edges of the multiverse itself. Stop! The architect's voice boomed in sheer panic. You are tearing the fabric of reality. You are eating the foundation. They didn't listen. They couldn't. They were locked in a cycle of pure destruction and absolute intimacy. Xyrus clung to Velith, crying as she felt his muscles tense and spasm under the immense cosmic pressure. He was shielding her from the agony, taking the fire into himself, and using the dying world to stay standing. They were two monsters, feeding on creation to keep each other warm. Velith! Xyrus screamed as the final, massive wave of power left her core. Velith took it all. His body arched violently. The golden mark of the mate bond flared on her neck, and a matching mark burned itself into his skin. The claiming was complete. The energy reached critical mass inside Velith. He couldn't hold it, and the universe had no more life left nearby to feed him. He let out a final, shattered roar. The energy exploded, but it didn't incinerate the room. It didn't destroy the architect. A wave of absolute, freezing silence blasted outward. It was a shockwave of stasis. It hit the creeping shadows of the architect. The shifting dark matter instantly froze solid. The voice of the supreme entity was cut off mid-scream. The shockwave blasted through the broken dome, washing over the dead galaxies and the remaining dying stars. Everything stopped. The wind died. The dust in the air hovered perfectly still. The rot creeping across the sky paused entirely. Time and space ceased to function. The multiverse didn't die, but it didn't heal. Inside the sanctuary, absolute silence reigned. Xyrus lay on the marble floor, her chest heaving. The burning heat was gone. She was cold. So incredibly cold. She slowly turned her head. Velith was kneeling beside her. His head was bowed, his silver hair hiding his face. He was perfectly still. Velith? She whispered. Her voice sounded too loud in the dead universe. He didn't answer. Chapter 8. The cold was absolute. No wind. No sound. No heartbeat from the stars above. Xyrus pushed herself off the marble floor. The sanctuary was a frozen tomb. Outside the shattered glass dome, the cosmos hung in permanent stasis. The rot was frozen. The architect was nothing but a trapped shadow completely locked inside the walls. It was over. She turned around. Velith? He sat on the ruined steps of the altar. His silver hair fell over his eyes. The golden mate bond mark burned brightly on his neck, the only source of warmth left in the room. He didn't look up. Xyrus walked toward him. Her footsteps echoed loudly in the dead universe. Velith, look at me. He slowly raised his head. Xyrus stopped breathing. His silver eyes were completely blank. The desperate, obsessive fire was gone. The agony was gone. The man who had torn the universe apart to keep her safe wasn't there. Who are you? Velith asked. His voice was flat. Empty. The words hit her harder than any physical blow. Xyrus dropped to her knees in front of him. She grabbed his hands. They were freezing. It's me, she whispered, her voice breaking. It's Xyrus. He tilted his head. He looked at her hands holding his. The mate bond pulsed violently between them. Instinct kicked in. He pulled his hands away, only to grab her waist and drag her forcefully into his lap. He wrapped his massive arms around her, trapping her against his chest. It wasn't an embrace of recognition. It was a feral, biological imperative. You are mine, he stated. It was a cold fact. Nothing more. Velith, please. Xyrus sobbed, burying her face in his neck. Remember me. You promised you wouldn't let me go. I don't know you. He stroked her hair. His touch was heavy, possessive, but entirely devoid of history. But the mark says I protect you. Nobody will touch you here. He didn't remember the 999 loops. He didn't remember the infinity altar. He didn't remember the architect, or the sacrifice, or the love that broke the sky. The abyss had collected its final payment. To freeze the universe and save her life, it took the last shred of his mind. Xyrus looked up at the dead, frozen stars. She had let billions of lives die. She had permanently paralyzed the multiverse. She had thrown away her humanity and become a monster to save the man she loved. And he didn't even know her name. Werewolf shifted, tightening his heavy grip on her. His blank silver eyes stared out into the dark, empty hall, guarding a dead world. "Why are you crying?" he asked, feeling her tears on his skin. Xyrus closed her eyes. The tears froze on her cheeks. She leaned her head against his chest. She listened to the slow, steady beat of his heart. It was the only heartbeat left in the entire universe. "Because," Xyrus whispered into the eternal silence, "I am the one who chose to stay."